Welcome, everyone, to this virtual organ concert by Mark Meyer, streamed from St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Newburyport, Massachusetts. Mark has been the music director, organist, and choir master here at St. Paul's Church for the past 15 years. He had previously served as director of music at the First Lutheran Church of Boston. And during that time, he studied organ with William Porter. Mark began as a substitute organist at his church in New Jersey at the age of 11. And he became the regular organist there at that church when he was 15. He received a Master of Church Music degree from Concordia University in Chicago. A fun fact about Mark is that he was the organist for his own wedding. Sometime you can ask his wife Virginia how that all came about. And we will be able to hear from Virginia as well this afternoon as she introduces the various pieces of music that Mark will be playing. But we're truly in for a treat today. A lot of people think the organ is just the perfect instrument for accompanying singers, but don't really get it on its own. And I think that's because most people haven't had the chance to hear a master organist like Mark. Even better, this is not a ticketed event. Instead, Mark is playing in support of St. Paul's, and the donations that are accepted will be used for that purpose. The suggested donations are $10 for individuals and $20 for multiple people watching together as a family or household. But please feel free to donate whatever you wish in thanksgiving for the wonderful musical offering that Mark is giving us and in support of the work of St. Paul's Church. St. Paul's has been serving the community of Newburyport and the surrounding areas since 1711, and we plan to continue to do so for generations to come. So anything you can give back in support is greatly appreciated. There is a donation link on your screen now and available at the top right-hand corner of your video screen. And in the same spirit, this Friday, November 27th, kicks off our virtual fall fair. The annual fair is a major undertaking for the church, with people typically coming from all around to take part. This year, things are having to be a bit different, of course. But we'll have our online auction running from this Friday, the 27th of November, through to Saturday, December 5th. A link to our auction is available below, or you can go to our website and find out more. But without further delay from a chatty priest, please welcome Mark Meyer and Virginia Meyer, who will introduce the music for us.
First in today's program is an arrangement of a traditional Thanksgiving hymn, "We Gather Together to Ask the Lord's Blessing." Although our association with this hymn is Thanksgiving, it is a Dutch patriotic song. Its roots go back to the 80-Year War from 1568 to 1648 between the Netherlands and Spain. The tune known as Kremser is an anonymous Dutch folk tune. Composer Mary MacDonald arranged this organ setting of "We Gather Together." She is currently organist at the Central Baptist Church in Knoxville, Tennessee. 400 years after this hymn was written, the words "We gather together" certainly have taken on a whole new meaning today as we offer this music to you, our virtual audience. Next, we will hear 2 organ preludes on the hymn, Now Thank We All Our God. The first uses a very light flute stop on the organ with a contrasting stop playing the melody in the pedals. The second setting of the hymn adds more of the organ stops, leading to a pull out all the stops conclusion. Michael Burkhart wrote the first of these 2 settings. He is an American composer, organ recitalist, and music educator. Paul Mons is the composer of the second of these arrangements. He was one of the most well-known of American organists and church music composers of the 20th century. Mark chose these pieces based on Now Thank We All Our God, partly because of the Thanksgiving theme. But the author of the words of this hymn, Martin Rinkart, intended it to be used as a mealtime prayer. Rinkart wrote Now Thank We All Our God in Germany around 1630 in the midst of the 30 Years' War. He was the pastor of the Lutheran Church in Eilenburg, which was a walled village where many sought refuge from the war. But the village was devastated by starvation, famine, and plague. It is said that at the height of the plague, he buried up to 40 or 50 people a day. In 2 years, about 8,000 in Eilenburg died in the epidemic. So Now Thank We All Our God becomes even more relevant for us in 2020. The next four pieces are from a collection called Women Composers Album. These pieces were edited by Charles Callahan. He is originally from Cambridge, Massachusetts, and is a concert organist and a composer of sacred and concert music. The first piece that you will hear, called Adoration, is by Florence Price, who was a pianist, organist, and composer of classical music. Her work has gained more attention in recent years as African American and female composers have been more widely recognized. She is noteworthy as the first African American woman to be a symphonic composer and the first to have a composition performed by a major symphony orchestra. Originally from Little Rock, Arkansas, she was a graduate of the New England Conservatory of Music in Boston. Florence Price was a devout Christian and used spirituals and African American church music in her arrangements. Many of her compositions show the influence of the blues style as well as European Romantic period music. Following her death in 1953, much of her music was lost, but in 2009, a substantial collection of her work was discovered in an abandoned house in Illinois, including a symphony and 2 violin concertos. Prelude in G minor is the second piece in this set. It is by Clara Wieck Schumann, a German composer who was known mostly as one of the most distinguished pianists of the 19th century. Her concert career of 61 years began when she was only 11. She toured throughout Europe, including London, Paris, and Vienna. Her husband was the composer Robert Schumann of Zwickau, Germany. Clara Schumann's image was on the 100 Deutsche Mark from 1989 until the euro was adopted in 2002. The third piece is called Gigue. The musical form called Gigue was derived from the English jig and is a lively dance-like piece. Elizabeth Turner was a singer, harpsichordist, and composer in England in the mid-1700s. She was one of the first published women composers at a time when it was rare for women to compose or to perform in public. The last of these four pieces is called Evensong. It is by Kate Boundy, about whom little is known. She apparently was a music teacher who lived in London around 1900. Evensong is one of only 3 published works from her. Did you like that little jig? It made you want to get up and dance, didn't it? Or maybe some of you were dancing. Mark wanted to include one piece that to him expresses some of the urgency and relentlessness and anguish that the coronavirus has brought into our lives. Litany is by a French composer, Jehan Alain. His short career as a composer began when he was 18 and continued until the outbreak of World War II, 10 years later. Alain was a skilled motorcyclist and became a dispatch rider with the French Army. In the Battle of Saumur in France, Alain was riding his motorcycle when he heard the German army approaching from around a curve in the road. He abandoned his motorcycle and killed 16 Nazi soldiers with his rifle before being struck down himself. For his bravery, Alain was posthumously awarded the Croix de Guerre. Litanies is considered Alain's greatest composition. The theme is derived from a medieval chant. It concludes with an intensely dissonant chord. Alain's manuscript was inscribed with these words: "When the Christian soul in its distress cannot find words to implore God's mercy, it repeats ceaselessly and with a vehement faith the same litany. Reason has reached its limits. Faith alone can go further." The next piece on today's program is called Elevation, Tierce and Taille. It also is by a French composer, François Couperin, who is from a prominent musical family in Paris. François Couperin was known especially for writing harpsichord music. He was often called Le Grand, or the Great. Elevation gets its name because it was written as a piece for the organist to play as the host is being lifted by the celebrant during the consecration of the Eucharist. In the subtitle, tierce indicates which organ stops are used, and taille indicates that the solo part is in the tenor range. Next, we will hear 4 arrangements of African American spirituals. The first is, "Were You There When They Crucified My Lord?" which we sing at our Good Friday services every year at St. Paul's. Charles Callahan, whom we mentioned as the editor of the 4 women composer pieces earlier in the program, wrote this arrangement for organ. African American spirituals did not originate in a pen and paper or printed form. They grew out of a more spontaneous and communal oral tradition, passed on in a sung form from generation to generation. "Were You There" follows a pattern known as call and response among spirituals. A common leader or single voice sings a question beginning, "Were you there?" to which the group answers by singing the refrain, "Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble." The next spiritual is "Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child." This dates to the era of slavery in the United States. It may have been sung after a parent had died or been sold, or after a slave child had been sold. The spiritual's repetition of the phrase, "a long ways from home," could refer either to Africa or to freedom. The words of "sometimes I feel like a motherless child" still haunt us today as we condemn the injustice of the separation of refugee children from parents at the U.S. border. Robert Powell, an American composer, wrote the organ settings of "Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child" and "We Are Climbing Jacob's Ladder." "We Are Climbing Jacob's Ladder" was in existence by 1825 and maybe as early as 1750, and was one of the first spirituals to be sung by white Christians. The words are based on the biblical account of the patriarch Jacob's dream in chapter 28 of the book of Genesis, in which he sees a ladder leading up to heaven. Slaves weren't allowed to talk while working in the fields, but they were permitted to sing and chant. This is how many spirituals were born. "We Are Climbing Jacob's Ladder" is a song about spiritual growth and the call to discipleship. The believer's journey toward God is one of persevering in the faith, rung by rung. The last of the four spirituals arrangements is "Go Tell It on the Mountain." The words are a retelling of the Christmas story in St. Luke's Gospel, where the shepherds get to spread the good news that Jesus Christ is born. John Benke wrote this lively arrangement. You might just feel like not sitting anymore during this one, so get up and sing and swing if you want to. We're not watching or listening to you. What did we tell you? Fun to dance to. Mark's favorite composer is Johann Sebastian Bach, and the Fugue in E-flat major, which Mark will play next, is one of his favorite Bach pieces. This fugue is sometimes called the St. Anne because its opening theme sounds like the first phrase of the tune for the hymn, O God, our help in ages past, although we don't know if Bach was even familiar with that tune. This fugue has also been called a powerful act of homage to the Holy Trinity. Why? Well, it's in the key of E-flat major, so there are 3 flats in the key signature. And the fugue is in 3 sections, sometimes called a triple fugue. The first section represents God, the Creator. The second section represents Jesus, the Son of God. The third section, you guessed it, is the Holy Spirit. Listen carefully and you will hear some of the St. Anne theme of the first section woven into the theme of the second section. The third section is in the form of a gigue. Remember that word gigue you heard earlier by Elizabeth Turner? Then the St. Anne theme pops up again while the theme of the third section develops. There is even more number symbolism going on in the symmetry and proportion ratios of this fugue. That is how Bach shows that the relationship among the Holy Spirit, the Son, and the Creator is perfectly equal. But don't worry about keeping track of all that. Just sit back and enjoy this example of Johann Sebastian Bach's musical and mathematical genius. Some of us more mature folks might recognize the next piece, The Entertainer, from the 1973 movie The Sting. It was originally a piano composition from the distinctly American style of music called ragtime, a style that was very popular in the US from the 1890s till around 1920. The ragtime style is a good illustration of how music can break through color barriers since it was so popular among both Black and white audiences. Ragtime gets its name from the syncopated or ragged rhythm. Often the time values of melody notes were changed, and this was called ragging the piece. Typical ragtime has two layers of rhythm, a regularly accented but even bass, like oompa, 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 beneath a strongly cross-accented treble, often with accents on the subbeats. The syncopated rhythm of ragtime may have had its origin in African drumming or Afro-Caribbean dance rhythms. Some of ragtime's success was due to the fact that it could be reproduced authentically on player pianos, which were very popular then. Scott Joplin, who wrote The Entertainer, was a Black pianist and composer from Texas. He holds the undisputed title, King of Ragtime. In addition to more than 100 published rags, he also wrote other piano pieces, arrangements, a ballet, and at least one opera. Joplin said, "It is never right to play ragtime fast." He also is quoted as saying, "A painful truth is that real ragtime of the higher class is rather difficult to play, which most pianists have discovered." Mark's over there nodding his head in agreement. E. Power Biggs arranged The Entertainer for the organ. One of the most famous concert organists of the 20th century, Biggs was born in England but immigrated to the US in 1930. For many years, he was the organist at Christ Church, Cambridge in Harvard Square. Mark is concluding his program with a piece written by Richard Fry, a friend of ours when we lived in Ridgewood, New Jersey. At that time, Mark was the music director at the Lutheran Church, and Dick Fry was the music director at the Methodist Church in Ridgewood. In addition to being a gifted composer and church musician, Dick is a very talented concert organist. This piece is called Trumpet Jubilation, even though it was written for the organ. It has interesting rhythms and a very celebratory spirit, and best of all, Mark says that it is fun to play. If Dick is listening today, Mark hopes that he will say, "I couldn't have played it better myself." It also seems like a good way to bring our program to a close. Thank you for gathering with us today.